the week my father-in-law handed me a list of home improvements he wanted done by spring. I was already 4 months behind on sleep and 11 months into quietly paying for everything under his roof. He slid it across the kitchen table like it was nothing. New gutters, repaint the garage, replace the water heater. He didn't look up from his coffee when he said it, just assumed, the way he always assumed, that the money would appear. It always had, because of me. My name is Noelle. Wait, that's taken. My name is Cecily. No. My name is Iris. Gone too. My name is I'll call myself what my coworkers call me. Steady. Because that's what I was. That's what I had been for 2.5 years inside that house. The one who stayed steady while everyone else leaned. I'm 31. A project manager at a mid-sized logistics firm in Ohio. Good salary, not flashy, not the kind people brag about at dinner parties, but the kind that quietly holds things together. I found that out the hard way. The kind of income that gets mistaken for inexhaustible. I married my husband the summer I turned 28. His name is, I'll call him what he was to me for most of our marriage, my husband. Just that, because that's all he ever fully showed up as. Not my partner, not my defender. Just the man whose last name I took and whose family I moved into 8 months later when his father had a minor heart event, and everyone decided someone needed to be there full time. That someone became me. His father, I'll call him my father-in-law, was 64, semi-retired, and ran a small landscaping business that had been bleeding money for 3 years. My mother-in-law had passed 2 years before I came into the picture, so the house was his, technically. He'd raised 2 sons there. The younger one, my husband, had never fully left in the ways that matter. When we moved in, it was framed as temporary. 6 months, maybe 8, just until my father-in-law was back on his feet. My husband said it with such certainty that I believed him. I was new to the family. I wanted to be the kind of wife who showed up, who helped, who didn't make things harder during a hard time. So I helped. The first month I paid the electric bill because my father-in-law mentioned it was due, and he was waiting on a check from a client, $412. I didn't think anything of it. The next month, I covered the internet and the gas. Then it was groceries. Just this once, just while cash flow was tight. Then it was the property taxes, which came in at just over $3,000 and landed at the exact moment his business had its slowest quarter. By month 6, I was paying $7,200 a month inside a house that was not mine. I want to say that slowly so it lands the way it always lands when I say it out loud now. $7,200 every single month. Mortgage contribution, utilities, groceries, household repairs, the lawn equipment my father-in-law needed for his business, the insurance on a truck that my husband drove. All of it, every month, quietly, from my account. And nobody asked. That part still sits in my chest when I think about it. Not that I paid. I chose to do that. What sits there is that nobody ever asked. Nobody ever said, "How are you managing this? Is this sustainable? Are you okay?" It was just expected. Like I was a feature of the house. Like the money was ambient, the way heat or light is ambient. Nobody questions where it comes from. It's just there. My brother-in-law, my husband's older brother, lived 40 minutes away and visited every Sunday for dinner. He would compliment whatever I'd made, eat 2 helpings, then sit on the couch I'd bought and watch the TV I'd bought, and never once offer to split anything. Not once. He'd slap my husband on the shoulder on the way out and say something like, "You got a good one." And my husband would laugh and agree, and I would stand at the sink washing dishes and think, "Yes, you do." My sister-in-law, my brother-in-law's wife, was nice enough in the way that people are nice when they have nothing at stake. She brought wine sometimes. She asked about my job in a way that sounded like she was already preparing to stop listening. Once she said, "It must be so easy having 2 incomes in one household." She was referring to me and my husband. She thought we were splitting things. We were not splitting things. My husband knew. He knew because the transfers came from my personal account every month, not our joint one. We'd had a conversation early on about how it made more sense for me to manage the household finances since I was better with numbers. And he'd agreed so easily it should have told me something. He never checked the joint account, never asked what the balance was, never offered to start contributing more once he found contract work again, which he did around month 4. He just assumed we were fine, because I was handling it. I handled it for 2 years and 3 months. The conversation that ended everything happened on a Tuesday evening in March. My father-in-law had called a family dinner, me, my husband, my brother-in-law and his wife. I thought it was just dinner. I made a pasta bake. I bought the wine. He waited until we were all seated to say it. He folded his hands on the table I had paid to refinish. And he said that he'd been thinking about the future. He was 66 now. He wanted to downsize eventually, maybe in a few years, sell the house and move somewhere smaller, somewhere warmer. He'd been talking to my brother-in-law about it. Then he said the thing. He said that before any of that, he thought it would be good for the house to have more stability. His words. More stability. He looked at me when he said it, and then he looked at my husband, and he said that he and my brother-in-law had talked, and they thought it might make more sense for my brother-in-law and his wife to move in. They were expecting their first child. They needed more space. The house was big enough. He said it would be a transition, of course. He wasn't asking me to leave immediately, maybe 2 months to find something. He smiled when he finished, like he'd just offered me something reasonable. Like this was a favor, a heads up, a kindness. My husband, beside me, said nothing. I watched him not say anything. I watched him look at his pasta, and then at his father, and then at some neutral point between them. I waited. I counted 4 full seconds. 5, 6, nothing. My brother-in-law cleared his throat. His wife smiled in that practiced way people smile when they want to seem like they weren't just handed something. I said, okay. Thank you for letting me know. And I meant something completely different by it. That night, after everyone left and my father-in-law went upstairs and my husband fell asleep watching television, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. I wasn't crying. I want to be clear about that. I was past the crying stage, and I didn't even realize it until right then. There's a moment when something shifts, when you stop trying to make something work and start calculating what it will cost to stop. I was already there. I'd been inching toward it for months, honestly. The dinner just closed the door. I got out my laptop and opened a spreadsheet. I am a project manager. This is what I do. I organize things. I create order out of chaos. I document. By midnight, I had 26 months of expense data pulled from my banking app and laid out in a clean table. Dates, amounts, categories, notes. It totaled just under $189,000. A number that looked like a mistake the first time I generated it and looked like a fact the second time. $189,000. I had paid $189,000 to live in a house I was now being politely asked to vacate. I closed the laptop, went upstairs, and lay very still next to my sleeping husband, and I thought about what I was going to do. I called my attorney the next morning from my car in the parking garage at work. She's someone I'd used a few years prior for a contract dispute at my old job. Methodical, unsentimental, exactly what I needed. I explained the situation in about 6 minutes. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Send me the documentation tonight. Let's look at what you have." I sent it that night. All 26 months. Every receipt I'd kept, every transfer, every email where I'd confirmed a payment on behalf of the household. Then I called my accountant. Then I called a moving company. I didn't tell my husband any of this. Not because I wanted to deceive him, but because I had already learned that telling him things in advance created a buffer zone where he could stall and defer and consult his father and run out the clock. I needed to act first. We could talk after. The movers were available that Friday. 3 days away. I spent those 3 days being completely normal. I made dinner. I did laundry. I asked my husband how his project was going. I smiled at my father-in-law over breakfast. I was steady. I was always steady. Nobody noticed that anything had changed because I had been invisible for so long that my presence and my absence looked basically the same to them. Friday morning, my husband left for a site visit by 7:30. My father-in-law had a client meeting across town. I had taken the day off work. I called the movers at 8. They arrived by 9. I want to describe what it felt like to watch them work, because it wasn't what I expected. I thought I'd feel sad. I thought there'd be this grief for the life I'd imagined, the marriage I'd wanted this to be. But what I felt was something closer to relief. Like a very long meeting had finally adjourned. I walked through the rooms and I was calm and I was clear and I knew exactly what was mine and what wasn't. The couch, mine. I'd bought it the previous January. The dining table, mine. Receipt from the furniture store dated 18 months ago. The living room rug, the coffee maker, the kitchen appliances, the guest bed, the patio chairs, the small cabinet in the hallway my father-in-law kept his keys on. Mine, 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 mine. I left what wasn't mine. His armchair. The old lamp he'd had since before I came. 2 pieces of art that had been his wife's. Everything else loaded into a truck in about 4 hours. At 1:15, my father-in-law pulled into the driveway. I heard his car. I was standing in the living room, which was now mostly bare walls and light rectangles where furniture used to be. I didn't feel nervous. I felt focused. He came in through the front door and stopped. The living room was empty. The kitchen had gaps where the appliances had been. The rug was gone, so his footsteps echoed in a way they never had before. He said, "What in the?" and then stopped. He looked at me. "I'm moving out," I said. "Today." His expression ran through 3 or 4 things quickly before landing on controlled anger. "We said you had 2 months." "You said I had 2 months," I replied. "I didn't agree to a timeline. This is," he gestured at the room. "You can't just take all of this." I picked up the folder I'd left on the kitchen counter. I'd prepared it the way I prepare everything. Tabbed, organized, clearly labeled, receipts, bank statements, dates, a summary page at the front that laid it all out in plain numbers. I set it on the counter between us. "Everything that left today has a receipt with my name on it," I said. "I paid for all of it." He opened the folder, he looked at the first page, he turned to the second. His jaw moved like he was trying to form a word and kept not finding it. "My husband arrived home at 2:40. I know because I heard his truck in the driveway and checked my watch on instinct. Old habit. I'd been coordinating arrivals for years. He came through the door and stopped exactly the way his father had. Same posture, same expression. Maybe it's genetic, that particular version of stunned. "What did you do?" he said. Not hello, not are you okay. What did you do? "I'm leaving," I said. He looked at his father who was standing at the kitchen counter still holding the open folder. He looked at the empty room. He looked back at me. "You're being insane," he said. "Dad gave you 2 months. Why would you do this today?" "Because I decided to," I said. "The same way you decided not to say a single word at that dinner." That landed. I watched it land. He didn't answer. "You could have said something," I said. "You could have said, let's think about this, let's talk it through. Maybe we should figure out the finances before we make any decisions." You didn't. So I made a decision. He ran his hand over his face. "You're being dramatic." There it was. The word that's supposed to make a woman doubt the size of her own experience. Dramatic. Like I'd staged something. Like I hadn't been funding this family silently for 2.5 years and had simply reached the natural end of my patience. "Look at that folder," I said. "Tell me if what's in it seems dramatic to you." He didn't look at the folder. The movers came back for the last load. My husband watched them carry out boxes without speaking. My father-in-law had gone upstairs. I didn't know what he was doing up there. I didn't follow. Before I left, I stopped in the kitchen doorway. My husband was standing at the counter where the coffee maker used to be, looking at the empty space it had left. "I didn't want it to be like this," he said quietly. "Neither did I said. "But here we are." I walked out the front door at 3:55 in the afternoon and did not look back. I checked into a hotel about 12 minutes from my office. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet, and quiet was the only thing I needed. That night, I ordered room service and sat cross-legged on the bed and laid out everything in front of me the way my attorney had asked. Bank statements. The expense summary. A separate file she'd flagged during our call that I hadn't fully processed yet. She called me at 8 p.m. "There's something interesting here," she said. I could hear the very specific tone of an attorney who has found a thing. I waited. "When the water heater was replaced last November," she said, "the invoice was processed in your name for purposes of the home improvement tax credit. Same with the HVAC work the prior spring. Your father-in-law signed off on it. Do you remember that?" I did remember. He'd handed me a form and said it was just paperwork. "Paperwork doesn't matter, just sign." I'd signed. In Ohio, my attorney said, there are established legal pathways around documented financial contributions to a property, particularly when those contributions include improvements that were formally attributed to your name. I'm not saying this is simple, but I am saying you have standing to explore it, potentially significant standing. I stayed very still on the hotel bed for about 5 seconds. "Okay," I said. "Let's explore it." The calls started the next morning, my husband first, then my father-in-law, then somehow my brother-in-law, which told me they'd already had a meeting about me. The voicemails stacked up in order of escalating urgency. My husband's was confused. My father-in-law's was stern. My brother-in-law's was the most revealing. He started calm and professional, and then, around the 90-second mark, his voice cracked just slightly when he said the mortgage payment didn't come through. Because of course it hadn't. I had stopped all transfers the morning I moved out. Mortgage contribution, utility auto pays, the grocery delivery subscription, the streaming services, the security monitoring, the pest control that came every quarter. All of it paused. My father-in-law had never paid the full mortgage on his own in over 2 years. He had been, without apparently registering this fact, dependent on my monthly contribution to cover it. Same with the electric bill, which ran high in that house. Same with the internet, same with the gas. They had exactly the amount of savings they had, which was not a lot, because the landscaping business had not recovered the way everyone kept saying it was about to. I did not respond to the voicemails. Instead, I sent one email to my father-in-law, copied to my husband, professional, brief, no insults, no accusations. It stated clearly that effective the date I vacated the property, I would no longer be contributing to household expenses for a residence from which I had been asked to transition. It noted that my attorney was reviewing the financial history and would be in contact regarding next steps. It included, as an attachment, the same expense summary I had left in the folder. I sent it at 9:47 a.m., and then I drove to work and I did my job, and I was, as I have always been, completely fine on the outside. My husband showed up at my hotel 3 days later. He knew which one because I had not tried to hide it. I wasn't running, I was just done. He looked tired. The particular kind of tired that comes from sleeping badly in a house that's too quiet and too cold and full of echoing rooms. I noticed all of this and felt something complicated about it. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent. The memory of loving him maybe. The shape of what I'd wanted us to be. The electricity was shut off for 6 hours yesterday, he said in the lobby, keeping his voice low. I know, I said. It was on auto pay from my account. The internet is gone. Same, he looked at me for a long moment. You planned all of this? No, I said. I planned to be someone's wife. What I did this week was what happens when that plan falls apart. He sat down in one of the lobby chairs without being invited to. I stayed standing. There's a certain kind of power in staying standing. Small, maybe, but real. My dad is talking about calling a lawyer, he said. That's fine. Mine already has. He put his face in his hands briefly. Then he looked up. What do you want? What would make this stop? And I thought about that question. Really thought about it right there in the lobby of a mid-range hotel in Columbus, Ohio, in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. What did I want? I didn't want the house. I had no desire to live there ever again, not for a single night. I didn't want revenge in any dramatic sense. I wasn't interested in ruining anyone, including my father-in-law, including even my husband, who had failed me in ways that felt ordinary and devastating in equal measure. What I wanted was to be made whole, for the contribution to be acknowledged, for the record to accurately reflect what had happened for 2.5 years in that house. I reached into my bag and set an envelope on the table between us. My attorney's letter, a formal itemization of documented contributions, a proposed resolution that included partial reimbursement or, in the alternative, acknowledgement of my equitable interest in the property improvements. He picked it up. His hands were steady but just barely. We don't have $189,000, he said. I know, I said. That's why there are options in there. I left him in the lobby. I had a conference call at 2. I was not going to be late. The legal process was not fast. I want to be honest about that. It stretched across 3 months of back and forth, during which my father-in-law called me ungrateful, my brother-in-law called my husband to say I was destroying the family, and my husband filed for divorce, which I did not contest. I also want to be honest that the divorce hurt. Not in the way I'd expected, not with crying or catastrophizing, but with a low, steady ache that I carried to work, and the gym and the grocery store and the new apartment I'd signed a lease on, a 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor with windows that faced east. It hurt the way something hurts when you've known it was coming for a long time, and you still weren't fully ready. But the hurt was clean. That's the only way I can describe it. It had edges. It wasn't the spreading, formless pain of living inside something broken. This was the defined pain of ending something. And defined things can be managed. The settlement came through on a Thursday morning. My attorney called me at work. I stepped into an empty conference room to take it. Because of the documented home improvement contributions filed under my name, my attorney had been able to establish a legal basis for equitable claim. The property couldn't be carved up, of course, but the resolution included a cash settlement that reflected a portion of what I had paid in, not the full $189,000. These things are never clean. but a number significant enough that when I saw it written in the settlement document, I had to read it twice. The house was going to be sold. My father-in-law had agreed to it rather than face a prolonged court process. My brother-in-law and his wife, who had been planning to move in, would need to find something else. I signed the paperwork with a pen I'd brought from my desk. My own pen, small thing. But I noticed it. There's a line I've heard people say about moments like this, that you feel victorious, that you feel vindicated, that you feel some clean, cinematic sense of justice. I didn't feel any of that exactly. What I felt was something quieter. Like a door that had been sticking for years had finally gently swung shut. My new apartment is good. I have a couch I picked out alone without consulting anyone. I have a coffee maker that is mine and has only ever been mine. I have a grocery delivery subscription and a streaming service and a pest control contract, and all of it comes out of my account by choice. For things I chose, in a space I chose. My husband, my ex-husband now, texted me once after the settlement. He said I didn't know it would come to this. I believed him. I believe he genuinely didn't know. That's the thing that took me the longest to make peace with. He didn't choose to take from me. He just never looked closely enough to see what was happening. He let it be easy not to look. And that is its own kind of choice, even if it doesn't feel like one. I wrote back, I know, but not looking is still a decision. He didn't respond. That was fine. The east-facing windows in my apartment catch the light every morning between 7 and 7:30 in a way that I didn't expect when I signed the lease and now feel unreasonably grateful for. I make coffee, I sit by the window. I think about the day ahead. I wasn't pushed out of that house. I walked out, and the life on the other side of that door turned out to be the one I should have been building all along.